Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin in just a few minutes. If you wish to speak during the meeting tonight, you need to fill out one of the blue cards, give it to the county clerk at the desk here, and we'll call you to speak. Under item 6, public hearings, you do not need a blue card. You'll be called on to speak by just holding your hand up during that period. Any other items on the agenda you wish to speak on, please fill out a card and give it to the clerk. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, is Reverend Calderazzo in the audience? There he is. Okay. Will everyone please find a seat and we'll begin the meeting? Call the order, regular meeting of the Destin City Council, February 20, 2018. If Reverend James Calderazzo would come to the podium, please. He's from the Safe Harbor Presbyterian Church. Will lead us in the invocation. If everyone will please stand.
Please bow your heads with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just want to begin this time of prayer by giving you thanks this night. Giving you thanks for your loving care for each one of us that are here this evening, the people of this city. We thank you for an amazingly beautiful day that we're able to enjoy today. We thank you for the city Destin where we live. We thank you this night for each member of the city council. We pray, Lord, and give you thanks for the time they give our city, for their willingness to endure long meetings, for their commitment to serving others, for their humility in looking to you for help and wisdom. We ask, Lord, that you bless this meeting tonight, that your spirit of peace and reconciliation and wisdom might be present. May you continue to guide the direction of our city, that we might be a place where all who live here and visit here may do so in peace and safety. And Lord, we end this night in praying for all those affected by the school shooting in Parkland, Florida. Lord, we pray an abundance of your grace and your mercy, comfort of all those who have been affected by the shooting this day and in the days ahead. Lord, we lift up these prayers this night in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Councilmember Marler, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would any member of the council wish to change any items on the agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to take 4E and move it to after the approval of the minutes.
Any objection from council to move 4E? If not, anyone else have a request? We have a motion. Do we have a second to move item 4E?
Second.
We have a second. Call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Do we have any corrections or suggestions for the minutes of December 4, 2017? If not, I'll accept a motion to...
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, have a second. Discussion. Call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. We're going to move to item 4E, Resolution 1811, abating staying enforcement of Ordinance 1723 LC, tree ordinance. Ms. Lejeune, you want to, excuse me, Jeff, would you mind reading by title?
It's not necessary to read it by title, Mayor.
Okay. Ms. Lejeune, any?
This was brought forward by the attorneys to give the council an opportunity to basically abate or stay the tree ordinance, to give staff an opportunity to review a lot of the comments that we received at the developer workshop and comments that we have received from the citizens, and bring back some amendments to the council to change some of the language in the existing ordinance.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and move to adopt Resolution 1811, which is abating and staying the enforcement of Ordinance 1723 LC, the tree ordinance. Further, I think it would be appropriate at this moment to instruct staff also to go through the process of removing the ordinance from repealing it, and at which point then we can set future workshops to create a new tree ordinance from scratch with more stakeholder input.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Mayor, if I may,
Please.
you have at least 2 blue cards for this item.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The motion and second is going to remove the ordinance from the for vote, and I guess it doesn't table it, does it? It's actually going to, we're going to start from scratch.
Well, the resolution temporarily basically puts it on pause, and it's no longer in effect. And then we'll need to go ahead and repeal it, which will require notice probably for the next regularly scheduled meeting. And then however y'all want to proceed from that point on, if y'all want to have workshops or whatnot and craft a new ordinance. But really, after this gets passed tonight, the tree ordinance is no longer in effect for all practical purposes.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure the audience knew exactly what that ordinance meant. And I'll begin calling members of the audience up to speak. If you do not wish to speak at this time because of the change in status of this ordinance, just please indicate that you don't care to speak. Gary Troop.
I'm sorry, I got the wrong thing done. I want to talk about short-term rentals.
Oh, B. Okay. No, you are correct. I was incorrect. Sorry. Okay. Teresa Hebert.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Teresa Hebert, and I, as the chairwoman of the part of the Tree Ordinance Committee, as the chairperson of this tree board, the original intent of this ordinance was to have it not affect homeowners. It was to be for the businesses and those developers. So I am very much in favor of abating and staying the order. To clarify, what we need to do is just change the language so that the homeowners are exempt from this requirement versus canceling and starting from scratch. Realistically, you don't have to do that to save the homeowners the monies that it was going to cost them by this 10th rewritten. So I don't feel like we need to waste another 8 months of redoing the entire ordinance. I think what we need to do is just look at it from the homeowner's perspective and remove them, because that was not the original intent of this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Alan French.
My name's Alan French, 50 Lands End Drive, and tonight I am representing the most wonderful group on earth, my children, your children, and all of our grandchildren. Now, I know there was a lot of consternation, anger, and gnashing of teeth over the details of the tree ordinance, so I wanted to share my overview and big picture view thoughts concerning the ordinance. I would like to give you all something to think about from a little different perspective. A lot of people feel that our 100 to 200-year-old heritage live oaks are an absolute treasure of our town, just like our white sand beaches in our harbor. Attempting to save these specimen trees for our children and grandchildren may not be a bad thing and is actually quite visionary. I hear many saying this ordinance tramples on our private property rights. Well, I agree with that. I agree with everybody that thinks this tramples on our property rights. Let me give you some other examples of how government tramples on our property rights. Example one, if I live on the bay and want to open a commercial bar next door to your home with live outdoor music until 2 a.m. and add a boat dock for 50 boats, should I be allowed to do this, even though it will ruin yours and your neighborhood's property values? I think not. There are zoning laws and noise ordinances to prevent this. But it's my property. I should be able to do whatever I want on my property. Example two, suppose I live on the beach next door to you and own property within 20 feet of the high water line, and I decide I want a garden. Should I be allowed to dump 3 dump truck loads of black dirt on the beach for my garden? Of course not. Not only is it against the law, but that would also ruin your property values and the beach for everyone. But it's my property. I should be able to do whatever I want on my property. Example 3. Suppose I live next to you in a neighborhood full of heritage live oaks, and I want to cut all of mine down and ruin your property values and the property values of the neighborhood. Should I be allowed to do this? So you see, this is really not a question of homeowners' property rights. This is really a question of what we value as a city. We obviously value our white sand beaches and the ability to live in peace in a quiet neighborhood without, that's God calling. We obviously value our white sand beaches and the ability to live in peace in a quiet neighborhood without the fear of a t-shirt shop moving in next door. If we didn't value these things, then we wouldn't have laws and ordinances to protect them. The question then for our city, our citizens, and our leaders is what do we really value and what kind of city do we really want? do we value these magnificent trees or not? My hope is that whatever ordinance we come up with, if any, will somehow focus on protecting these God-given wonderful trees, because once they're gone, y'all, they're gone. Now, if our citizens and our city leaders decide that property rights outweigh the value of 100 to 200-year-old live oaks, so be it, and y'all have at it. Enjoy your concrete jungle of a city as your property values plummet. Maybe you can even find a tree museum to visit with your grandchildren to explain what a magnificent old live oak looks like. In the meantime, just remember the immortal words of Joni Mitchell, don't it always seem to go, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. They paved paradise and they put up a parking lot. I'm done.
Thank you. Lee Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to take just 1 second and check your cell phones. Or do we only need to check one cell phone? Thank you. Lee, go.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Lee Moore, representing Howard Group. I'll just...
Still need your address.
585 Grand Boulevard and Suite 201, Miramar Beach.
Thank you.
Just want to, I won't repeat it, but echo every single thing that Alan said. We agree with that wholeheartedly. I'll add one thing to that. You know, we're talking about these beautiful old oaks and the way they look, but it just bears mentioning that trees serve much more than an aesthetic purpose. And if any of these issues ring a bell, you'll know that they have been huge issues for this city. Drainage and erosion control, noise abatement, all of those kinds of things are, and there's a list this long I could go through, but in the interest of time I won't, but those are some major ones. So they're important for a whole lot of reasons. Pollution and air quality improvement as well. They also keep runoff, as much runoff from making it to our water bodies. I think clearly we have some issues with that. So I'll say that. And the last thing I'll say is that clearly we support this ordinance. Listen, if there are technical and interpretation related issues that made it into the document that are creating unintended reach of the ordinance, then great. I commend you for being willing to step back and take a look at that and improve it. But the intent all along, and I've been to almost every public meeting where this was mentioned, and everything I ever heard was the intent was to preserve our large old heritage trees. We think there's a lot more worth than just those trees, but at a minimum, the intent was to preserve those. So hopefully we can quickly get something back that is maybe more focused and get out the areas that are up to interpretation that might cause problems for people. But anyway, just hope to see something come back real soon and get something in place so that we can stop the reduction of the tree canopy and start mitigating and replacing it as well for generations to come that we won't necessarily benefit from, but a lot of folks in the future will. Thank you.
Thank you. Aubrey Santucci. Aubrey? No, excuse me.
Hello, I'm Aubrey Santucci, 724 Bayou Drive. I'm here tonight representing Coastline Tree Service and also myself. I'm an independent consultant, ISA certified arborist, and I have been for 5 years. And I'm here to recognize you guys on a lot of hard work trying to put the ordinance together. I know it's very difficult and very challenging. While some of the language is very respectful and I can agree with it, there's a lot of language that I just simply cannot. And I have spoken with several property owners, commercial and private, and the mitigation fees are off the chart. I would highly recommend you guys, if we're going to echo what everybody says and hear about, let's protect the 200-year-old live oaks, then by all means, let's do that. But let's not try to, assess a unnecessary fee on a 2-inch diameter tree that we can't even identify in this ordinance. I think that is just unnecessary at this time. I would like to encourage you guys to step back with the ordinance and let's take a look at it. I'll be glad to help you guys put my 2 cents in, but I definitely think it's going in the right direction, trying to help the private property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last comment card I had on this item. Councilmember Ramswell.
Well, obviously, I second the motion tonight because my concern is the intent. And I think what started out as something that was really good, with all the different input and all the different direction coming in, it turned into something that became way too complicated. And if I can't read through it, my neighbors can't read through it, and you can't take away a very clear picture of what is and what is not allowed, then it definitely needs work. So I am completely on board. I don't know, and this is something for us to consider. Is it easier at this point to try to whittle it back down, or is it easier to try to start over and just pick out the pieces of it that work? I'm not sure, and that's something that perhaps we need to discuss tonight, but whatever's in place right now doesn't work. Again, best of intentions, but it's too confusing. One concern I have is if a resident owns their property, we're talking a private homeowner, and they have several trees that they need to cut down. According to this, and from what I'm understanding, they would need a permit and a fee for each tree. And I'd kind of like to revisit that, because is it not feasible to do one permit and outline which trees would be addressed by that particular permit? And that way save a homeowner some money while still ensuring they're doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm. Excuse me, Mayor. Was the motion by Councilmember Destin, did that include workshopping this? Was that part of the motion, or was that a separate recommendation? Okay. We would be happy to entertain consensus to have a workshop. Ma'am, that would bring all the council members together. You could ask all these type of questions at that time, rather than us trying to answer questions right now for something that may not even be enforced after the vote.
That makes sense, and I'm all for it. Again, we don't need to put something together piecemeal and then it ends up convoluted and nobody knows, what the original intent was. So, thank you.
Councilman Dixon?
Are we going to take this document and use it as a working document and change it, or are we going to come up with a whole new document? That's my question and concern. I mean, I know that people put a lot of work into this, and I do understand the frustration. I get it, but I hate to start from scratch.
I think it would serve as a template in the workshops in the future, and we can build from there, because there's still a lot of it that makes sense. We've always lived with a tree ordinance in this city. I think it would be a lot of people have done a lot of good work, but we need to use that as a template, and I think that'd be appropriate rather than going completely from scratch.
Me too, and that's the reason I asked the question.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. One suggestion that was brought to me was that instead of a fee, we plant another tree somewhere where it doesn't inhibit that. But a couple of the speakers were specific about some live oaks. So I'd like you to reach out to those people and find out exactly if there's a target area that they're looking at, that we can find out if we can save those trees, if that's part of the problem that we have.
Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad Reverend Calderazzo asked for humility tonight, because I was humbled by the public's response to it, and if I was smart, I would have listened to y'all on the second reading of this document. On July 5th in 2016, I got a unanimous vote to send this out to RFP to have a professional draw up the ordinance. And I was talked out of it to have delegated to the tree committee. And one of my concerns was they weren't experts in writing ordinances, and I think that's one of the reasons why, in y'all's words, the gentleman from Indian Bayou, it was mind-boggling to read. And I think after waiting 18 months for something that's been on our radar for a long time and a goal of the council, you know, this passed with the unanimous vote, we were excited, and I certainly, you know, I was kind of the ringleader of this tree ordinance, and I think in my, you know, to finally have something in front of us to vote on, we voted on it, and we're taking it back tonight and taking another look, which is what we should have done in the first place when we realized it probably wasn't a great ordinance. So I am happy to support this tonight.
I see no further discussion. I call for the vote. Unanimous yes, passes.
Mayor, could I get a consensus on the workshop? I just want to make sure everyone's okay with me going ahead and scheduling that.
Is there any objections?
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. June, are you going to introduce Steve Mitchell, or should I, for the Public Works Safety Committee annual report? I guess I just did, didn't I? Mr. Mitchell? You're going to have to explain the limp first.
Have a bad knee like me.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Steve Menschel, the chairman of the Public Works Public Safety Committee, and it's my pleasure to submit to you the committee's annual report for 2017. Our committee members are Sam Perman, Scott Jacobs, Guy Tadlock, Kevin Schmidt, Phil Jatta, Anthony Ramswell, and myself. City staff liaisons are Mr. Joe Bodie, David Campbell, and Ms. Kim Montgomery. Committee members that left the committee this year, unfortunately, was Ms. Nancy Weidenhammer, as we all know. The committee accomplishments and highlights for the year are summarized as follows. In the last year, there have been 9 regular meetings. The committee serves as a sounding board for citizens' concerns, and all are encouraged to attend our monthly meetings to discuss them. This year, the committee addressed facets of all the 2018 work plans. City staff and committee members discussed issues culminating with reports and recommendations to the city for review and resolution. Items in each of the previously approved work plan addressed during the year are summarized as follows. In October, the committee discussed the Indian Bayou speed hump request and reviewed the airport road safety audit. The committee made final preparations for both the booth at the Destin open house and obtained a bicycle once again donated by Walmart that we gave away. In November, we did not have a meeting. In December, the committee motioned and approved the 2016 annual report and the 2017 work plan. The committee motioned and approved to forward the 2016 annual report and the 2017 work plan to the City Council. The committee motioned and approved to have the city's information manager add to the city's website the statement, "The tolls assessed from crossing the Mid-Bay Bridge are not accessed by the City of Destin." The committee discussed attendance of council members at other city meetings, and the committee reviewed our annual report and work plan. In January, the committee was briefed by the city manager. In February, the committee was briefed by the engineer assistant on a variety of topics to include the Indian Bayou Drainage Project, the Sandalwood Drainage Project, the concrete plan and the concrete disposal, the Zebra Street, Calhoun Avenue Pedestrian Phase Project, Crosstown Connector, and cleaning and repairing the drainage system on Highway 98. The committee also reviewed the committee handbook and received CIP updates. In March, we had no meeting. In April, the committee expressed concern about the safety of pedestrians and bicycles with so many missing sections of sidewalk along Airport Boulevard. The committee motioned and approved to have the city manager contact Commissioner Kelly Wines and ask him to assist us with getting the lights repaired at the James Lee Park that have been out for almost a year. The committee motioned and approved to have Chairman contact Ms. Davis Campbell to get an update on when the possibility of the pork chop turn islands to provide restrictive movement in the median cuts, and depending on his update, we'll have a report drawn up for the city to bring to the council. The committee also discussed bushes over the sidewalk on Main Street and notifications for canceled meetings. In May, the committee was briefed on the new city Adopt a Street program. In June, we had no meeting. The committee sadly, in July, the committee sadly, due to the loss of Miss Nancy Weidenhammer, motioned and approved myself as the new chairman and Anthony Ramswell as the new vice chair of the Public Works and Safety Committee. In August, the committee once again discussed the traffic issues on Dolphin Street based on complaints from Major Brown. The Dolphin Street issue was added to the tracking sheet, and a new traffic study will be requested during 100 days of summer in order to get a more realistic traffic count, tracking sheet number 1703. In September, the committee was briefed on the Sunsail subdivision pedestrian crosswalk request. At the meetings, we also discussed the sheriff's reports, bushes and lines of sight, drainage issues, street lights that are out, missing street signs, holes or digs in the roadways, sidewalk issues, golf carts on roadways. At our meetings, we hear from each member on their assigned area, and at all meetings, we receive monthly project reports from the engineer assistant. That concludes this report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions before we move on to the work plan.
Councilmember Braden?
I'm going to wait till after the work plan, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
No further comment. Go ahead, please, sir.
Okay. The work plan for 2018. The Public Works Public Safety Committee is pleased to submit to the Destin City Council the committee's 2018 work plan. City of Destin Public Works Safety Committee is comprised of 7 members, each serving 4-year terms consecutive with that of the councilor making a nomination. The committee members elect a new committee chairman every even-numbered year in May. Our meeting date is the second Tuesday of each month at 5:30 p.m. Staff liaison is the Public Services Department. A mission statement of the Public Works Safety Committee's purpose is to identify and review various functional areas relating to public works and safety, including street construction and maintenance, public parking areas and sidewalks, city right-of-ways, and the likes. Assess the need for projects relating to matters of public safety, including but not limited to traffic signals, street light, crosswalks, and emergency management information. And to staff recommendations to City Council, the committee objectives shall be based upon the implementation of the city's comp plan. The committee objectives of the Public Safety Committee are based on Chapter 2, Transportation Element, Objective 2.1, Policies 2.1.6, 2.1.7, and 2.1.8, and Chapter 7, Recreation and Open Space of the Destin Comp Plan. Strategic Plan Implementation. Provide assistance as needed in the design and implementation of Gulf Environment Benefit Fund, Stormwater Grant, multiple-year projects. Stay informed about citywide connector and assist as needed. Continuing goals are to provide for citizen information, exchange for bicycle and pedestrian safety, and make recommendations to the City Council. Review the 5-year pedestrian facilities plan, including pathways master plan, and evaluate alternatives and prioritize implementation. Support citywide concerns by reinitiating meetings with the city manager, community development director, community redevelopment committee manager, public information manager, city attorney, Destin Fire Control District, including the Beach Safety Division and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, and other federal and state agencies as the opportunity arises. Publicize results in the local newspaper or on the city website to promote greater public awareness. Provide an avenue for citizens' concerns and input on stormwater management issues as follows: localized flooding issues, drainage system failures, citywide stormwater master plan updates, and stormwater utility fee adoption. Initiate and monitor committee priorities, points of interest, including the following: committee's role in implementation of the strategic goals, vision triangle median safety, lifeguard beach safety program, safety on U.S. Highway 98. monitor specific area assignments and report safety concerns and make recommendations at monthly committee meetings, provide an avenue for citizens' concerns and input right-of-way safety issues, including speed hump policy, roadway safety audits, low-speed vehicle safety, street lighting, set up booths for Destin Open Public House, and provide handouts and information on bicycle and pedestrian safety, as well as information to the public on toll roads and the committee. The staff's public services representative, public service director, and assistant city clerk. I've already given you the names of the individuals involved, and the areas of assignment are listed in this thing. Finally, the areas of responsibility include review assigned areas at least monthly for safety concerns, review area for proper signage, conditions of roads, sidewalks, bicycle paths, median, streetlights, drainage, etc. Review any citizens, homeowners, associations concern, recommendations, and report concerns, recommendations at monthly committee meetings. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Discussion, questions? Could I have a motion?
Good job. Yes, I do not see the recommended motion, but I will be glad to offer it. Somebody else finds it first, please.
Thank you for a great job, Mr. Steve. I'll make the motion. I move that the City Council approve the 2017 annual report and the 2018 work plan as submitted by the Public Works Safety Committee.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion?
Thank you, Steve. Having served on that
Yeah,
committee
thanks,
before
Steve.
and after
Great job.
my terms in office, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I call for the vote. Unanimous yes, passes. Thank you very much. Good job. Ms. Lejeune, Noriega Point project?
Yes, sir. I would like to invite up to the podium Mr. Pierce Barrett. He's a project manager for Restore Act, and he is here to give us an update with the current Noriega Point project. Thank you for being here, Mr. Barrett.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Ms. Lejeune. I'm proud to be here tonight, fact that the Noriega Point is on schedule at this point and is still within the budget that was allotted. So we're happy to have that happen. We're about probably halfway through the restoration stabilization part of the project. If I can do this right without messing up like I did last time, y'all may invite me back again. This is what basically I'm going to present on tonight: the Noriega Point construction status, the dredging plans, which will be the next major step moving forward, and will affect the harbor and some of the other areas, the boating traffic that will need to be aware of the dredging activity. The finalization of the stabilization portion of the project, and then the next step, which will be the dune vegetation element, and then the final portion of the project, which will be the recreational component. As of September of 2017, our contractor mobilized and began work on the site. The first step was installation of the sheet piling. He began installation of the heavy-duty composite sheet piling on T-groins 3 and 4, which are new structures out there, in October of 2017. And as of December the 15th of 2017, he had completed this work. It was actually ahead of schedule. The contractor then demobilized and remobilized after the holiday period and began work again in the 1st of January. Began installation of the marine mattresses, which are the basis of the foundation of the stabilization portion of the project. After that, the marine mattresses installation for all the groins, that includes 4, 3, 2, 1, and the spur, which are the older portions, is to be completed by mid-April. They began placement of the stone portion of the project on T-groin number 3, which is the new northernmost T-groin, not the very point, but the northernmost T-groin. That began this month in 2018. Completion of placement of the groin right now is estimated to be in late April of this year, And the dredging will mobilize in March, around the middle of March, and is expected to be completed by the middle of April. There we go. This is what it looks out there, what it looks like out there now. You can see what the formation of how Noriega Point will be once the dredging activity is completed. The circular piece is the northernmost groin, which is a new groin, which will be the northern point. T-groin number 3 is that part right there. That is a new structure, and then that is the last of the old structures, T-groin number 2. Of course, realize also groin number 2, number 1 in the spur will also be reestablished and restored. This is just to give you some pictures. I appreciate Taylor Engineering's use of the drone in taking these pictures. It's hard to really tell what's going on from a landward side. Even if you go out on the water in a boat, you only see a portion of it. The only way you can get a view like this is if you're standing on top of the 98 bridge. The black area, as you see right here, is the mattress. That's T-groin 3, and that was the installation of the marine mattress. The marine mattress is, for those of you that may not remember on the earlier presentations, is rock enclosed in a geotextile fabric. And that's the basis on which the rock is placed. This will keep the rock from settling as has happened in other years in past work out there. This is another view from the south showing some of the same activity. This is the mattresses you see here, and you can see some up here, and that is the placement of rock that has already occurred on T-groin number 3. If you're out there right now watching them, they're doing both these simultaneously. They're putting the rock in, and they're also putting the mattresses in. Just again, there's another view. You can see what Noriega Point looks like now. You can see what it's going to look like, or imagine what it's going to look like by the end of this spring. All right, the permit for the permitted area for dredging on this project is shown on this slide. This has been presented before. This is the, whoop, I just jumped ahead, sorry. This is the southernmost area that can be dredged. This is the northern area, north of the bridge, up on the outside of, and this is in the intercoastal waterway, the channel of what's Crab Island, and then here's the harbor portion to be dredged. The contractor will start in the harbor and perform the dredging activities there, and then he'll move north and perform the dredging activities in the northern permitted areas, and then if necessary, he will get the remainder of the sand that's needed for the project out of this area right here. This is the actual plan from the dredging contractor. He's showing the colored lines you see in there. And I know it's hard to read, but this presentation, these slides are available here with the city. But the colored lines show the actual piping that will be placed for the dredging activity. The contractor is going to be using a 24-inch dredge. And the blue piping is the piping that will be placed for the activities in the harbor. And the yellow piping you see up there is the piping that will be used for how it's going to be oriented for the dredging activities from the north and south areas. The red areas that are shown on that pipeline is where the pipeline will be submerged. The rest of the pipeline will be floating pipeline. It will be marked and highly visible. That is what the project will look like once the dredging's finished, with the exception we don't show all the sand in there, but this will be the new dune structure. Well, too many buttons. This will be the new dune that's constructed with the project when it's completed, and we will revegetate that new dune starting in July, and it should take no more than 30 to 60 days to complete, so they'll be finished in the early part of the fall. The recreational components of the project at this time still include a new entryway into the park, additional parking, bike racks, ADA accessible restrooms, a pavilion and boardwalk with ADA access to the beach, multi-use boardwalk that will go around the backside or harbor north side of Noriega Point, and it's also ADA accessible. And when I say multi-use, pedestrians, bicycles, whatever the city wants to allow out there on it, it can be used for. City has control over the use. We're proposing at this time 3 dune crossovers. You can see them right here. These go from the harbor side to the beach side or the inlet side. And they will connect the boardwalk and areas along the harbor for access to the beach or vice versa. The restroom facilities and ADA accessible pavilion, boardwalk, so forth, that will be near the entrance to the site. This is existing city right-of-way. This is the new road. This is the old area right here in front of the condominium where parking is available. This is the new area with the turnaround cul-de-sac. This is just a blow-up of the area. That's the south region. You can see the driveway and the new parking. There's approximately 18 new parking spaces. That's a rendering of what Noriega Point will look like come the summer of 2019. The recreational components didn't mention, but that portion of the work, the implementation of the recreation, will begin this fall, shortly after the vegetation's completed, and is expected to take about 6 to 9 months and will be completed by late spring of 2019, so that that will not interfere with the use of the park. Actually, hopefully the park will be completely open and ready for the public. So if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer what I can now. If this is my contact information along with our public affairs manager. If any of you, the boating public or anyone else of interest, has any questions on any of the activity out there, please feel free to contact me at either my email address or my phone number. Or if necessary, and you don't get that down, forget it, pass your questions on to Mr. Campbell here with the city, and he'll forward them on to me.
Council member, questions, discussion? Okay. Councilmember Marler.
You're the topic of discussion and everything, because being privileged to work on the harbor and watching what you're doing each day, you'd be surprised the number of people who walk by and just look at what you're doing, especially the sand movement that you're doing right now. But I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm glad that things are on track, and I'm looking forward to it, looking the way that the drawing shows.
Well, thank you, sir. Right. And you also can congratulate our engineers who've done a good job on the design, and they've coordinated the construction very well. And I also appreciate our contractor. They've done a good job as well. They're very qualified and have kept to the schedule, and whenever there's been any issues, they haven't blown up. They've kept them in track, and we're still moving along. So thank you all. Like I said, any questions come up, please feel free to get in touch with me. We'll be glad to get the information back to you.
Thank you.
Look forward to coming back at the end of the spring. And
we'll move to the public comments on agenda items next. There's quite a few on 4B, so I would ask those that wish to speak on it, if the previous speaker or speakers before you has already covered the same thing you wish to cover, please just let us know that you agree with the previous speaker, and it's not necessary to repeat it again. Mr. Troop, try a second time.
Hi, I'm Gary Troop, 86 Shira Street, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to thank those who participated in the short-term rental task force for their efforts. It was hard work and very time-consuming. Ms. June did a great job of facilitating the group and documenting the results. I attended a few of the meetings and have a few comments and observations. First, there seems to be a myth out there among some people that Crystal Beach was developed and zoned as short-term rental. Completely false. Most of the Crystal Beach neighborhoods are zoned as single-family residential, just like other parts of Destin. Second, my understanding is that short-term rentals in single-family residential neighborhoods were originally conceived to allow homeowners to make extra money by renting their homes, their second homes, to families. This has morphed into the building of mini hotels that sleep in excess of 30 in single-family residential neighborhoods. Those mini hotels want to have the right to have events at 3 times occupancy, so that would be 90 people at the event. There are 3 of these mini hotels across the street from my house. What family wants to stay next to one of those, even when they're on vacation? It's a nightmare for those families. Other homes have been modified to use laundry rooms and non-bedrooms as bunk rooms, increasing their sleeping levels north of 25 people. What single family travels with 25 people? Destin is not the only city wrestling with this. Neighborhoods nationwide are having this problem. Organizations like Airbnb and VRBO are spending millions on lobbyists to introduce legislation to limit cities' ability to protect neighborhoods under the euphemism of protecting property rights. But in reality, they are stepping all over the property rights of people who purchased homes in single-family residential neighborhoods and destroying traditional neighborhoods. This is not a problem unique to Destin. Many cities in Florida are enacting ordinances to protect single-family residential neighborhoods. Nationwide, cities such as Los Angeles, Nashville, New Orleans, San Francisco, etc., are enacting ordinances to actually prohibit short-term rentals in single-family residential neighborhoods. There's been misinformation that categorizes Destin residents south of 98 as anti-short-term rental. That is simply not true. No one proposed blocking short-term rentals south of 98. However, residents desire certain enforceable codes to reduce the impacts to residential neighborhoods south of 98. It is my understanding that no short-term rentals are allowed north of 98. That is perplexing to me. There should be one set of consistent rules for all of Destin. So I'd like to debunk some of the rationale used by those who oppose occupancy limits. The first one I heard was, it's not uncommon in the United States for 3 generations of families to share a home, so having multiple families in one home is an American tradition. First, that example is actually one family, not multiple families. Second, maybe in the old days when someone owned a farm, but today that kind of arrangement is highly unusual in places like Destin. It's meaningless for setting policy that's forward-looking. Here's another one. To be fair, any restrictions put on short-term rental units should apply to residents. That's backwards. If short-term rental contingent wants one set of rules, they should abide by the existing limits that apply to long-term rentals under Destin Ordinance Article 7, registration of long-term rentals, which is restrictive in terms of occupancy to 2 adults per bedroom. There are also a number of good line items about noise, trash, parking, etc. So if they want a set of rules, it's our rules, not theirs, okay? Residents' rules. This one's my favorite, they say. We are raising the property value of your home. No, these large, high-occupancy homes are actually reducing my property value to lot value because they will eventually convert everything to a mini hotel. They'll tear down my house. The current City Council put rules in place to limit future construction on mini hotels, but if no occupancy limits are put in place, those limitations will be aggressively attacked and reversed. An objective look at the amount and who is funding certain mayor and city council candidates illustrates that developers are attempting to stack the deck and remove those constraints. Short-term rental advocates mischaracterize residents regarding events. No one ever said that 8 guys couldn't come down to fish and have a crab boil in the backyard. If occupancy limits are adhered to, then no problem. It's great that short-term rental task force suggested precluding the advertising of such events on websites and marketing material, but 2 to 3 times occupancy twice a year is far too impactful on residential neighborhoods. Further, agents will charge a premium for those 2 legal dates, and I think we'll actually see an increase in the number of events because people can now legally do that. So what we're doing is we're actually legitimizing having events in neighborhoods, not precluding it. So rental agencies say we don't need no stinking ordinances. We'll be good. Just give us a chance. I have 5 grown kids. I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard that type of rationale from a teenager. We're here today because they have not done a good job. Large rental agencies step on, bully, ignore residents' complaints. Some are better than others, but in general they are dismissive of residents. Their response more often than not is to swear at you and to taunt you with, why don't you just call the police or code enforcement? This is not my job. They know full well that without ordinances, those 2 groups can't do anything. One task force member actually said to my wife, pointed his finger and said to my wife, you just need to move. And I say, no, you need to rent and your renters need to behave appropriately for the area for where your units are located, a single family residence.
Please wrap up your times due.
I'm out? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhonda Dorsey.
Okay. My name's Rhonda Dossey. I own property in Sovereign Isle, 4575 and 4579 Woodwind Drive, and I own property at 77 Dolphin Street. Yeah, I remember it. I'm here as a property owner for Sovereign Isle. I'm wearing several different hats tonight. A property owner of Sovereign Isle. I have seen a proposal and a PowerPoint presentation made in October that identified some vacant property that could be considered a parking lot to take the pressure off of Crystal Beach. Crystal Beach does have a parking problem. I have a short-term rental there. I have plenty of parking. I'm not causing that problem. I believe that the managers and the homeowners need to solve that problem. I don't believe the city needs to be building parking lots to take that pressure off. Much like the song that the gentleman earlier quoted, the Joni Mitchell song, let's pave paradise and create a parking lot, or build a parking lot. I don't think we need to be building a parking lot to take the pressure off of Sovereign Isle. Sovereign Isle's water retention area is in that Gulf Power easement. The Emerald Breeze would be affected, Sovereign Isle would be affected, and so would Sunsail. That's not our problem. That's Crystal Beach, and it needs to be solved in Crystal Beach. We have code enforcement. If we need more code enforcement officers, that's what we need to do. They need to write tickets, but we don't need to be paving more parking lots, and we don't need to be spending the city's money on that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Rick Scally.
I'm Rick Scally. I live in 3675 Scenic Highway 98 in Crystal Beach. I serve on the short-term rental committee. I moved to Destin in 2002 after 30 years as a Canadian CEO. I cashed in my retirement and purchased 4 rental homes, all in Crystal Beach. I have since added 8 additional homes and now manage Easy Street Vacation Rentals. Most of the rental houses I do manage for other people were formerly guests of mine and decided to buy a piece of paradise and rent their homes out. I graduated from Destin Forward. I serve on the board of directors of the Destin Water Users, and I serve as their treasurer. I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for 15 years, and I've served with Rotary for 10 years. I also served on various committees with the city, including the dog park. I love the city, and I've been involved with the city for the last 15 years. Destin is probably one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen in the beaches, and I've traveled all over the world. That's why I decided to retire here. Having said that, I volunteered to serve on the short-term rental committee because I know there are bad actors in our community, in the vacation rental business. Chiefly those are out-of-state owners that manage their properties over the internet and never step foot in Destin, or infrequently step foot in Destin. So when I volunteered for the committee, I wanted to address the issues that are giving the vacation rental business a black eye. I identified those as 5 areas. Number 1, parking. It's a problem. Number 2 is trash. Number 3 is noise and rowdy behavior. Number 4 is code enforcement. And number 5 is the absentee owners. Now, City Manager Lejeune has done a great job on code enforcement. They're now staffing on weekends, which I think is great. I think our committee has done a great job in dealing with those 5 issues. It's my position, if we identify those 5 issues and correct those 5 issues, then there is no other problem. When I got on the committee, I found out also they're actually trying to change the vacation rental business. Now, tourism is important to Destin. It's important to the state of Florida. If we start impacting tourism in Destin and the state of Florida, we've got a problem. We get no taxes for the state of Florida. There's a lot of people that actually move to Florida because of the no state taxes. They come from a high state tax community or state and then move to Destin. Restricting occupancy, I'm very much against. I think if we deal with those 5 issues, occupancy is a non-issue. If code enforcement enforces all of those ordinances, we don't have anything. Now, the proposal that we submitted to the city council, if the city council wants to approve all those that were unanimously approved, I think they've done a great job. In fact, that'll solve 90% of the issues. Those that were a split on the vote, I think it needs a lot more work on that. I'm not in favor of those at all. The concern I have is that the vacation rental business and tourism specifically make a great livelihood to a lot of people. A lot of people in Destin are employed in the vacation rental business or the tourism business. And if we start throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we've got a problem in our hands. And so those are my comments, and I thank you very much.
Mayor, I have a question.
Thank you.
Sir, do you live in Crystal Beach or do you live across the bay?
No, I live in Crystal Beach. I live in Crystal Beach, and all my rental homes are in Crystal Beach.
So you don't have a house across the bay?
No, I don't have a house across the bay.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Why would you ask that question?
I was just curious.
No.
Thank
you. 3675 Scenic Highway 98, right next to near Captain Davis.
Thank you. Keith Dean. Please. Let the speaker speak.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and appointed officials. I'm at 6757 Highway 98. Thank you for your service and opportunity to speak regarding the short-term renters stakeholders task force recommendations. My name is Keith Dean. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Emerald Coast Association of Realtors. We are the 3,500 real estate professionals that are in the Destin and surrounding areas, many of which are also property managers. As an industry, we oppose any restriction that limits the use of private property, provided those rights exercised comply with current ordinances and do not impede on the private property rights of others. That being said, I'd like to commend the council for, first of all, putting together the task force, and also the task force for all of their work. As industry experts, I'd also like to offer our assistance to the council and to the task force, because a lot of broad strokes have been missed. There's a lot of things that need a little more attention on this. These recommendations are moving along too fast. One is there is an issue related to the calculations used. We don't have a capacity issue. What we have is we have people that come in our community and don't act like they do in their community. They leave trash out by the road, they park all over the place, and what that does is that impedes on our property rights as residents. Those are what we need to focus on. These recommendations focus on around the problem by trying to come up with an algorithm for a number of people per square feet or parking spaces. We need to work through the problem. We need to go forward at what the real issues are. If we didn't have trash being an issue, we didn't have parking being an issue, 15, 20 people in a house would not be a problem. And I disagree with the previous speaker. My mother has 8 siblings. Each of those have at least 2 to 3 children, and now all of us are having grandchildren. So we do vacation together, and so getting a big house and all being together is part of the fun of vacation together. These recommendations, many of them use bedrooms as the basis of their calculations. Bedrooms are defined as a room with a window, closet, and a door. Bedrooms are not defined in a consistent basis. Bedrooms as defined are not a consistent basis for determining the capacity or required resources of a rental. Short-term rentals often have pocket bunk beds in the hallway, sunrooms, sleeping balconies, and other rooms that don't meet this definition of a bedroom. Another example is trash. And these recommendations, again, use bedrooms for hopefully resolving the trash issue. number of bedrooms don't correlate to the production of trash. A family with several toddlers is probably going to have more trash than a family with one teenager. I mean, of course, that depends on the teenager, but at the end of the day, we need to be working through the problem, not around it. I would suggest that we look at another solution, in that if there is trash outside the home, if it's up by the road, if it's on the curb, if it's on the ground, if it's on the entrance to the house, then that needs to be fined. That's how we need to approach that. Signage. The recommendations require signage to provide all of the following: number of parking spaces, number for the responsible party, a number for the management office, and the primary address of the property owner or the property manager. That's a big sign. I don't think that we want these signs in our neighborhoods. Are these signs supposed to be permanent? That's not spoken to. It's something that can be put up and taken down during the season. That's something that we need to address. This is an important issue for us as realtors. We have commitments from our state legislators that following this 2018 session, they're going to sit down, roll up their sleeves, and work with us in drafting legislation that will help us with these issues. We want to work with you on these issues. I think it would be great for our community to come together and to lead the state with this issue instead of just follow it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Wampler.
Ken Wampler, 310 Laurel Loop. Welcome. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the time. I want to commend the Short-Term and Vacation Rental Committee. I think they've done an outstanding job. If you didn't realize, they met every single Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And Ms. Lejeune had the dubious honor of trying to referee that. They had some very healthy debate and discussion, and as been stated before, and I won't repeat, there's a number of items that I think that the group agreed on, and I think it came with a give and take. More importantly, I think the major vacation rental management companies were represented at the table. 3 of those individuals and 4 full-time residents, and the 3 representing the vacation rental management companies got the big players together outside of those meetings and made sure that everybody would comply with the restrictions. They made stricter restrictions relative to the key issues that have been stated already: parking, noise, trash, and registration. Obviously, they've all agreed to come to the table and to adhere to those. And what I would, I guess, encourage the council is to use the process for what it was intended. And the intent, I believe, was to get the stakeholders involved and get from them a consensus of what should happen with the short-term vacation rental. You have those. There's still some items that are not agreed, and I would encourage you to direct staff to come back with a proposed ordinance that reflects those items that were unanimous. With that, then the vacation rental management companies are already going to stand behind it. You have beefed up code enforcement. Part of the issue is management. I think was mentioned many, many times. It's management from many levels. It's management from city staff, code enforcement. It's management from the homeowners. Not just the rental homeowners, but those that are negatively impacted, and it's management from the vacation rental management company. If we work together and we do enforce the stricter fines on the key issues, I would recommend that you maybe look at bringing the committee back together in the fall to evaluate the positive and negative impact of what the unanimous items were that were agreed upon, and if further actions are needed, then further actions are needed. And what that means is that either A, we did a poor job managing it from a city standpoint, from a vacation rental management standpoint, and that obviously we need to enforce stricter ordinances. I wouldn't be up here to say you need to have stricter ordinances, because I think private property rights are paramount to every single one of us, but I don't think my private property rights should negatively impact my neighbor. But at the same time, I think we need to be sensitive to it, and if we're going to restrict occupancy for my house, then we need to restrict occupancy for everybody's house. That's hard to stomach, like when, I live in a community that doesn't have short-term rental in it, but I live in a community that does have long-term rental in it. And I can tell you, code enforcement doesn't enforce the occupancy on long-term rentals. I personally do it because that's the kind of person I am. I address it myself. Everybody in the city of Destin doesn't want to do that, and I understand that. But what I would encourage the council to do is look at the big picture. What was the intent of the committee? The committee has unanimous ideas that they think you need to adopt. There's where you should adopt, and then reevaluate the impact in the future, because if we continue to impact the vacation rental, it's going to continue to impact real estate market. Real estate values obviously are where they are because of a multitude of things. The beautiful environment we live in, the great businesses that are here, the amenities that are offered, and vacation people that come here buy here. I wasn't one of those fortunate individuals, but there's a number of people that live here now because they vacationed here at some point. That drives real estate values, obviously supply and demand. We're running out of land, and so we need to do a better job managing what we have. Population grew from 2005 to 2010 by 10%, and at the estimate for 2016, the occupancy has grown another 10.96% since 2010. So clearly, occupancy of the residents is growing every single year. So some people move in, some people move out, but more people are moving in. And when we do that, we have to balance, obviously, the wants and needs of every single person. And luckily or unluckily, as a city council, you have to weigh all the pros and cons. And so I would reiterate the need to adopt and have city staff bring back for first reading an ordinance that reflects the unanimous items that the committee recommended, which will make a huge impact on what's going on and negatively impacting my neighbors and your neighbors in all the communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jason Sprinkle.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman. Appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Jason Sprinkle. I live at 437 Captain Circle in Regatta Bay, and I've lived here for 15 years with my wife and 2 kids. I operate 360 Blue Vacation Rentals, which manages about 540 properties. Very few, only a handful of those are in Destin, but we are seeing a lot of beneficial actions taking place in Walton County and the way we handle our vacation rentals over there. So I asked to be on the task force over here to try to make a difference in what's happening over here, and we would obviously like to grow our business here as well. I sent a brief email to the council members this afternoon. It reiterates kind of what Ken was saying, but I'll read it into the record if you guys will indulge me. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on the Vacation Rental Task Force. I took this obligation very seriously, and I worked hard to bring the entire vacation rental industry in Destin to the table to work on these solutions. It was a difficult process, as some of the folks alluded to, and I was honored to serve and was pleased with the overall efforts that both sides brought to the table to reach compromises. In the end, I do think we made great progress in hearing one another and in recommending some significant changes to the City Council that we were all able to reach across the table and agree upon. These items or compromises have the full support not only of this task force and their members, but of the key players in the Destin vacation rental market. With the makeup of the committee representing essentially the 2 extreme opposite sides of this debate, which I think was wise for the City Council to do, we came up with some very well vetted and important measures that are critical to improving the vacation rental landscape, in my opinion. They focused on 2 much needed areas: one, absentee owners and managers that was mentioned a minute ago, and the other is kind of the idea of improved enforcement. These included 4 critical ones: much stiffer fines for trash infractions and the required number of cans based on the number of bedrooms, which I do think will work; significant penalties and the complete loss of your short-term rental license for the failure to register repeatedly; adding a requirement responsible parties be located within 30 miles of the property and have the full authority to come resolve issues, including up to evicting people if necessary; and an annual registration sticker on the sign so that we can do a better job of catching the huge number of people that just aren't registering and aren't even participating in our efforts to clean up vacation rentals. In addition to these items, however, there were a number of additional items that were pushed through or passed without the support of the vacation rental management community. Most of these are costly, in my opinion, unenforceable, and significantly impactful to the economics of Destin. More importantly, they're opposed by the vacation rental community, and they don't fairly represent any consensus from these 2 groups that you guys asked to get together to come up with recommendations for the task force. These include a couple things that I'm particularly concerned about, and I think the vacation rental owner are concerned about as well. The first is a requirement that the city review signed and sealed interior and exterior drawings from a licensed building inspector for every vacation rental home every year. I think that's probably worse on the city than it is on us, but it seems awful onerous. A limit on the occupancy to every 2 guests per bedroom plus 2, which on our calculations will impact about 2/3 of the rentals in Destin. A requirement that vacation rental managers and owners somehow physically verify occupancy compliance within 36 hours of check-in. I have no idea how we would accomplish that. And a commercial activities limitation that requires so much math that residents and owners simply won't understand it. To Preble's comment on the tree ordinance, I really think some of these proposed ordinances that we were imposed in large part just because they weren't good ordinance. They weren't well thought out and they weren't well conceived. So we would ask you to approve the recommendations that both sides of the task force came together and voted on. Thank you for your time.
Mayor, I have
you.
a question. If you don't
Please.
mind. Mr. Sprinkler, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Was there a lot of attendance from the public at these meetings?
There was a good bit of attendance.
Were they allowed to speak and give their input?
We tried our best to give 10 minutes at the end of every meeting, except for the opportunities where we ran out of time. But most meetings we had a couple of minutes for each of the members who wanted to speak from the public to speak.
Okay, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Please, no applause. Bruce Kroll.
So, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Yes, I'm Bruce Crowell. I live at 42 Terracotta Way. I've been in the same house for almost 28 years. I've been here before, and of course, you all know I've been the chairman of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I'm your current chair of the TDC. Also, I was with Abbott Resorts for 7 years when it was in its infancy. I was the director of operations. When I got there, we started with 540, I think, properties, and we built it to almost 3,000 and rolled it up into what you now know is Resort Quest. And so I've been in the hotel business, for 46 years, since 1972. So I know a little bit about all this stuff. It's all I've ever done. And I was on the task force, and I shared with everyone that I thought the biggest problem, as some people just said before me, is a management problem. And not necessarily a city management problem, a management problem that has become a city problem because, other people haven't managed, things that need to be done. We got a lot done. A lot done. You have all that in front of you. Trash, signs, local management. The biggest problem, and the reason that I wanted to serve was I thought that most of the problems that we had were a result of what happens with VRBO, HomeAway, Expedia, Airbnb, and the like, because that is either lack of management, absentee management, or no management. And there's about 750 houses, I'm rounding, that fall into that category, and probably most of those properties do not have somebody within an hour's drive, which is what the current ordinance says. They're supposed to be able to show up if there's a problem within an hour. While I did not agree with the occupancy regulations that was voted on, and I voted for it because I think we need occupancy regulations, unlike my fellow friends in the vacation rental management business have alluded to. I think you have to have something to keep people that go out there and say they have a 4-bedroom house that sleeps 30. I mean, that's not what Destin's vacation rental business was built on. We were built on families coming to Destin with their wife and kids and their sister, maybe some grandkids, right? And so I was more looking for like 2 to a bedroom, plus 2 or 4 or 6, and kids under 12 don't count, something like that, so that it really catered to the families and not to a block of people that live in Atlanta or something that go, well, let's all get together and rent a house and see how low we can get the price per person down to. Okay, because that's Therein lies the problem. The other reason that I got into or asked to be on the committee was because I think events should be at event menus. And yes, I have a selfish reason for saying that. But I think weddings should be at a wedding venue. I think, big parties should be in places that are built for that. And not just because of what the whole thing is with the neighborhoods, but also because you have licensed professionals serving food and beverage in license-approved facilities and all the things that go with it. I'm a professional. I have a degree in hotel and restaurant management, and I told you how many years. I mean, what has happened is, part of this business has been taken out of the hands of those people who do this as a profession. And all these guys behind me, they built their businesses, and most of them, I can say the ones in this room are very professional at what they do. But there's those absentee owners and so forth, they're the ones that need the help. I think that there's some information that you may or may not know about over in Tallahassee, that's going to make sure that everybody's licensed, which is good. Make sure that everybody has to conform to the same rules and regulations that we have to conform to in a place like the Emerald Grand. And so you have all the things before you. I would ask that you really consider, though, the occupancy situation, I think, is a little too much too restrictive. I think we can do a lot of different things to improve from where we are, and that one needs a little tweaking. Thank you.
Thank you. All reports I've gotten, this committee worked diligently to reach this point, and didn't really expect you to agree unanimously on everything. The committee was too divergent, but at least most items you've got a majority. And we do appreciate your hard work. It seems to be, I can recognize most of the committees in the room tonight. I'm going to ask that we take a short break, and we'll come back with the city manager's report. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. We're ready to reconvene. Ladies and gentlemen, let's reconvene. I have one more item, one more card on this item. Miss Patty Brown, would you please come to the podium? And that will end the public discussion.
Hi, Patty Brown, 86 Shira Street, Destin, Florida. I was the only woman on the short-term rental task force. It was daunting at time dealing with a whole table full of testosterone-fueled males, but I was able to hold my own. I think you need to look at everything that we voted on. They're all very important issues. And the voting on a couple of the issues was not split. It was 5-1, 5-2. So it's a little bit frustrating for me that we're kind of downplaying some of the things that I feel are really important. And one of the things I really take offense to is the sign. That was my idea, and it came up because Ms. Clarice said, we can't have an army of code enforcement people. We have to make this as simple as possible. And that having a sign with contact information, showing that it's currently registered, what the parking is, makes it very easy for a code enforcement officer to drive down the street and be able to visualize that instead of having to come back to the city hall and make decisions on, well, did they have enough parking, did they not? So there's already signs there. We're not asking for a huge billboard. We're asking for a sign on a house that will identify the things that we have a problem with. And we do have a problem with parking. And some of the stuff I don't agree with the short-term rental people on. But being a mother of 5 kids, I don't take anything at face value. If someone tells me something, I investigate it. And that's exactly what I did. All this about short-term, it's only the Airbnbs, is absolutely untrue. And that was with trash. I drove Crystal Beach, and I wrote down on Thursday, 2 days after trash, which houses were culprits of their trash cans being out. It is not just an Airbnb problem. So, you know, I think that it's very frustrating when people make blanket comments like that. There are a lot of problems in Crystal Beach. I particularly feel occupancy is a huge problem. I know the rental agencies hate me for that, but I truly believe that is the top and everything else flows down from there. So I really hope that you look at our recommendations. You realize we spent a lot of time, very heated at times, but always in the best interest of Destin and the future of Destin. And the reason we were chosen to come out and speak and to try to work to come up with some things was because we have a problem here. This is not something that wasn't a problem. People that live here are tired of the same old, same old. And it's not just a few bad players. I'm so tired of hearing that. It's a lot of bad players. So what we need to do is you need to take each one of our recommendations, really talk about it, come up with, you know, what's fair to everyone. But, you know, this throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Hey, what about the residents? You know, I mean, how much do you think that we need to take? It's unfair that we don't have some rules and regulations. And I'm completely frustrated with people that say, we don't need any regulations, we don't need any restrictions. Chaos ensues without regulations and restrictions. We do need some regulations and restrictions. And as long as it's in your best favor, you can, defend it. But this past week, I have been brutalized on these Facebook pages because of my campaign signs and getting notices on my house that I have 10 days to comply, and that all this, people stepping on my sea oats and my dunes that I built. And then today, the opposition did the same thing on a developer's lot. I mean, let's play fair. I'm just tired of it being all about me. This is our community. This is our future in Destin. We have to work together. Everybody has to give and take. And I just don't see it. I see it all about me and what's best for me, and I don't care how it affects Destin or future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to set aside the order of the day and move item 4B to in front of 4A. I think we're hitting a stride here, and as much as I'd love to hear Mr. Trammell's Waterways Management Options Report, it may be a little lengthy, and it might cause a little bit of a bump in what would otherwise be a smooth transition, so I think that's probably appropriate.
Have a motion to...
Second.
And a second. Councilman... I see no any discussion by council. Not seeing any, I call for the vote. Unanimous yes. Short-term 4B will be the next item on the agenda. Discussion by council.
Mayor, I think I'm probably... Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So, as was stated by a few of the task force members, there were some challenges along the way, but I do have to say that it was a privilege working with these citizens and business owners. They were committed, they were diligent, they were well-informed, and very, very cooperative. There was heated discussion at times, but this is a very hot-button item that, as stated previously, affects the entire nation, and especially communities here in the state of Florida. So the final work product, which you have in the form of a report for council consideration, was very well thought out. It was fully discussed and properly voted upon by the task force members. There are some that have a unanimous vote and some that are not unanimous. The task force has asked that the city continue to track Senate Bill 1400, which we are doing, and that depending on the outcome of that particular bill, that the task force be allowed to reconvene at some time in the future if necessary. That means that we cannot sunset that committee at this time, and they will remain under the Sunshine Law until they are properly sunsetted by this council. If you look under the recommendations by vote, they are separated by issue, and then following the recommendation by vote, there are also some additional suggestions that came out during the course of discussions that were not voted on, but I felt were relevant for council to be aware of. So, looking at the recommendations, you have three possible motions that you can make. One, to approve all of the recommendations that you received, and then to direct myself to make the necessary changes to ordinances and bring back to council for adoption. The other potential motion would be to only approve specific recommendations. There were some suggestions that it only be the ones that are unanimous, or you could bring recommendations forward that were not voted on at all and again, direct myself to make the necessary changes and bring back to council for adoption. Or you can at this time move to accept the recommendations and take no action if you wish to wait and see the results of Senate Bill 1400. So with that, sir, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. So when we were first going through this process over a year ago, we had before us a whole smattering of rules and regulations to try to get our arms around the short-term rental issues that we're having, and how it's impacting our residential communities, especially the ones near the beach. And it struck me that it probably would be better, rather than just ham-fistedly passing some sort of rules that could have unforeseen impacts that we didn't really understand, we needed to go and put this into a short-term rental task force where we got all the stakeholders together, even as acrimonious as we knew it would be, put them in the same room and say, either you're going to kill each other or you're going to figure this out, and we're going to see how much progress we can make. And I know it's tense in here tonight, but we have made a lot of progress in a lot of meaningful ways. And my opinion on this is, whenever you can see low-hanging fruit, you grab the low-hanging fruit. So to that end, I think, Doug, if you've got the sheet, I know some of you have it written, but I believe we have unanimous consent on about 7 of the 18 items. And if it pleases the council, I'm going to put this into a motion to where we can instruct staff to draft language that will be adopted that will bring in the items that we know are the easy ones. And then what I'd like to do is instruct staff to have the other items set for a special workshop, because I want to understand them like the members of the short-term rental task force understands them, because they do, each side has merit to their argument. I want to hear how it really could affect and what it's going to look like from a nuts and bolts standpoint. And the only way I can do that is to sit in a special meeting where that's the only thing, and those are the only issues I'm going to talk about and understand, because we're not going to figure it out tonight. We can be here till 2 a.m. talking about this stuff. So I think let's go for the low-hanging fruit, and then let's instruct staff to set a special workshop where ourselves and every member of the short-term rental task force can get in a room, and we're going to hear a presentation. We're going to go item by item, and I want to understand each one of these things, and then we can come up with what our next move is going to be. I think that's probably the most prudent thing to do, especially given we're approaching 8 p.m. So
is that a motion?
It's going to be a motion. So if people are watching, I'm going to move that we instruct staff. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay, so let's go with item number 1. Item number 2 under trash. I believe item 10 under the registrations. Item 11. Item 12. Item 13. And item 14. The other items I really sincerely... I'm sorry. Am I missing 17?
Well, 17 says it was a unanimous vote, but
14.
Mr. Sprinkle dissents. So he opposed it, but he wasn't present. So it was unanimous technically.
Technically. I want to hear why. I'm not going to include that one. So I have 1, 2, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Second.
Okay, and the rest of the motion is to have staff get with each member of the advisory board and each one of us to set a meeting where we can all attend. And that may push us out, but we all need to be there so we can discuss all the remaining items.
Yes, sir. I have the direction.
Great. Okay, that's my motion. I think.
Thank you.
Tuffy, you happy with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a motion. We have a second. Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. The question's come up again, and I was wanting if staff could clarify. In our residential areas, the single-family, I believe it's 2+2 land development code, why does that not apply to a short-term rental home that is in a zoned area that's short-term or single-family?
I apologize, sir. Could you repeat the question for me?
In a residential area that is zoned single-family, does that's in our LDC, does that not apply to a short-term rental home?
There is state statute that allows short-term rentals, vacation rentals to exist in single-family zoning. So they can exist right now. There's certain restrictions on what we can and cannot regulate for short-term rentals, but they are allowed in single-family residential zoning.
Didn't we pass something that was 2 + 2 in the single family? Was that short-term, long-term?
It was long-term rentals, and you did consider, back when we were talking about LDC amendments along with the comp plan, it was brought up, but you didn't pass it at that time.
Okay. I knew we talked about it. So really can't enforce the single family in a single family home when there's 20 people there, 20 people staying. There's really no way we can enforce that.
That would be occupancy.
Right.
And right now, there's no occupancy restrictions for short-term rental.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of the process, as Councilmember Destin had referred to. When you were working on the LDCs, you wanted to put occupancy into the LDC for short-term rental. And that's when many folks came forward, and the council decided, let's go ahead and have a committee discuss this rather than just, blanket pass occupancy. Let's see if there's a way we can work this out.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you. One of my concerns is I attended probably at least half of the meetings and listened. I didn't interject because I didn't want to interfere with the process. I just wanted to listen and, see what the conversation held. If we waited as a council for a unanimous vote, we wouldn't pass anything except the minutes. And so my concern is, are we ever going to reach a point where the short-term rental is unanimous on any of these other ones that tend to be a little bit more divisive, I guess you could say? I don't know. And I know that the whole goal of this committee, as Councilmember Destin laid out, was the public came to us on September 18th and said, why do you guys want to just put this out there? Why unilaterally make a decision? Listen to your public. And that was genius. So that's what we did. The next council meeting, we approved a task force. And the goal, of course, was a cross-section of the community, from full-time residents to property managers to folks that rented from afar. The goal was a cross-section so that we could show how everyone worked together to come up with policy together for a joint decision. Now, is that going to change if we have more workshops? I mean, I don't know. So that is my only concern going forward, that we're not going to make any difference whatsoever and we'll just be stalling. But if that's the way to go, to have more feedback from the public and more from the committee, I'm happy to move forward that way, because this is the goal. I mean, the goal ultimately is getting something that is a good balance of property rights and that all of us can live with together as a community, because ultimately we are a community. We got to live together. We've got to work together. So I just wanted to share my thoughts. One additional thing that I wanted to mention was, it looks like points 5 to 8 had to do with wedding and commercial venues. And one of my concerns was some of this was in areas that do not allow commercial activity. Is that correct? Or was this going to be a blanket? What was the goal of these particular points?
Commercial activity is not allowed in single-family residential. The task force was trying to determine a fair and equitable way that they could deter the large events from happening. Now, as staff, we are working to keep those commercial activities from happening, and it's by intensity and frequency. And whenever we know that there is an event happening, we send our code enforcement officers out to investigate, and they document. And it is a special magistrate that will make the determination based on the documentation of intensity and frequency on whether or not this is a commercial activity. So that is something that is currently on the books. That's something that we are currently working. But the task force was looking at maybe a better fix for restricting the large events that happen into the single-family residential, something that's on the book that you could just point to and say, now you're in violation. And we don't have that mechanism right now.
Okay, I'll stop there. I was going to, because I know we do define commercial activity in the Land Development Code, but I won't get into that because then we go off on a whole other tangent of different things. But point made, and thank you. And thank you to the short-term rental task force because, I mean, seriously, having sat in these, I know it was not fun. I know it was not easy, and I really appreciate all of you that stepped forward to do this and to represent your community and try to create something that works for everyone.
Councilmember Foreman.
Thank you, Mayor. Technical question as to the nature of the task force. Does the task force member that I appointed continue to serve?
That would be up to the council. As part of this report, they had asked that they be allowed to potentially reconvene after we see what happens with Senate Bill 1400. If it is the intention of the council to allow them to reconvene and not sunset them, then they continue to remain under the Sunshine Law. If the council feels that they have done what they've been asked to do and you want to sunset, you can do that, and then they would no longer be under the Sunshine Law.
Well, what I'm concerned about, I guess, is that if there's no activity, then you're going to lose the members anyway, because they won't have anything to do.
I don't think they're going away.
I know what I'm suggesting is if we want to hold on to them, then we need to structure it that way so that there is some activity, and that way we'll get some benefit from the committee, from the task force.
Well, from my understanding, that the workshop was a direct invitation for all of the task force members to be present and participating in that workshop, so
Okay.
they will have something to do in the future.
That sounds good to me.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong. When we give a permit to have a home built, and there is X number of parking spaces that's required, all right, say 3 cars or 3 spaces. So that's part of my, I kind of agree with the signage that is what is permitted and that should be all there. I understand a lot of people want to bring all their own cars, but there's a point when enough is enough, and Mr. Dixon can help me on this because I believe he was the one. I don't know if that ordinance we passed a couple of years back that had to do with how many vehicles could be in your yard at one particular time, boats and motorhomes, falls into the same category or not. But and I remember you spearheaded that, Mr. Dixon. And what I'm about to say, I don't mean any offense to anybody, but the occupancy reminds me of going to a circus and seeing how many clowns you can put in a VW Bug. And, I mean, 4, yeah, there you go. Because when I, as a child, living in Florida and all your relatives want to come visit you during the summer, as a kid, it was fun because we had a mattress that was pulled out just for that occasion, and all the kids had to give up their bedrooms, and all of us slept on the living room floor on a mattress. And it was fun when you're a child, but when you're an adult, how many people can you really cram in a bedroom and actually get a good night's sleep? I just, that just boggles my mind all the way around. And while I agree that I don't think it's going to be one workshop. I think we're going to have a couple to actually fine-tune all this, and I look forward to trying to work with everybody on this. But the whole point is like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I have a house. I have a 3-bedroom house with a detached garage room. So if I wanted to take that detached space, even though I live on Kelly Street, well, I don't have a homeowners association to worry about, I could rent that out as a short term under our current plan, even though it's technically in a residential section, but it wouldn't be allowed. And okay, all right, that's part of what I'm trying to figure out, why we make some areas different than the other, I guess. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Mr. Destin about the unanimous votes. It is low-hanging fruit. There are some issues, and I'm not going to go on at length with them tonight, that I do feel strongly about, but the way this was structured was to have, and I think it was originally Mr. Dixon's recommendation to have a majority of residents and the minority of short-term rental companies. And a lot of these are kind of split down those party lines, if you will. But certainly on the wedding and commercial venues, I have some real concerns about that. But I do think we need a meeting, so since I wasn't at the short-term rental meetings, I'm not fully informed of all these issues, and I would like to hear both sides of them. I will support this.
I see no further discussion. If there's not any, I will call the question. Unanimous, yes. We need Ms. Lejeune. You want to start your city manager's report?
Yes, sir. This is the Destin Waterways Management Options, and at your January 2017 meeting, you had unanimously approved a bid for a reconnaissance study from Taylor Engineering to explore advantages, steps that needed to happen to pursue either a designation as a port for Destin or Waterways District. Taylor Engineering has conducted meetings and conference calls with state and federal agencies, and they have provided a final report, which you have as backup to this agenda item. Mr. Matt Trammell from Taylor Engineering is here tonight, and I would like to invite him up to just kind of give a presentation about the body of the work that he performed for the city.
Thank you, Ms. Lejeune. Matt Trammell, Senior Engineer with Taylor Engineering. And I know we have a full agenda, so I'll try and keep this brief. We just wanted to really hit the highlights of the report, make sure everyone was on the same page. And I don't take offense to Mr. Destin's little shot at me, concerned about a long report. You know, I'm an engineer and I want you to have all of the data and the facts that's necessary to make an informed decision. So it is a very important issue. We're going to try and be brief. We know it's getting late. So as we know, we were brought on in response to all the concerns that were raised by citizens, council members, a number of public forums. We just a quick outline. The goals of the study were first to assist you in exploring what options may be available to help better manage not only Destin Harbor but all the city waterways. The first step was a natural identifying the existing resources, research opportunities for funding support. Funding is always a critical issue when developing management considerations, and then summarize these and present steps forward for the council's consideration. So when we dove into this, we started researching past council meetings, speaking with a number of concerned citizens. I serve on the harbor board. I was aware of a lot of these things even before becoming under contract, but as you can see, there's a lot of issues. There was a lot of issues that were thrown around. A lot are very diverse. There is no silver bullet that's going to address all of these, and they're quite diverse. Some of them deal with economics. Some of them deal with public health, safety, and welfare. That's primarily where we focused our efforts, and there's a little bit of everything else in between. So to try and better refine our recommendations to you, we had boiled these down into 3 primary planning categories. Public health, safety, and welfare, as we know, is of utmost importance. Coastal resource sustainability and resiliency, that's also extremely important and ties in well with health, safety, and welfare. And then also the economic development consideration. I'm not going to waste any time with you all know where we are, but as you are aware, the city of Destin, as it's commonly referred, is we confuse the unincorporated areas of Okaloosa County into the city limits. So there are a couple bayous, Regatta Bayou, Jones Bayou, that were not considered for this study. We primarily focused the harbor, East Pass, Marlar Bayou, and Indian Bayou. Destin Harbor, we're all familiar with this, the pump station to the far eastern end, East Pass Navigation Channel, Noriega Point. Looking at the existing resources we have, quite a few. We have a federally authorized and maintained navigation channel. It's somewhat small. The issue is we don't have a dedicated funding source for that channel to keep that channel dredged. While it is federally authorized and maintained, the Corps of Engineers does not have the funding, so that is something we need to keep in mind. How perhaps can we assist or the county assist? I've heard a number of folks mention, well, how many slips are even in the Destin Harbor? How many slips can the Destin Harbor support? We had one of our lucky staff get to count all of the boats. So this number you see, I want you to pay attention to approximately 1,300, 1,400 boats within Destin Harbor. That does not include the wave runners and the livery vessels. We did not include that in our analysis. It was too difficult to count, 5 boats in one particular slip or alongside tied to this dock. But now that you have the livery ordinance, you should be able to, easily quantify those number of slips. And then outside, we have 700 slips in Choctawhatchee Bay and the city bayous. And then comparing that, looking in Okaloosa County, we've got 18,500 registered vessels. We all know how important boating and waterways are to the local area, and that just goes to show you that's a significant number of boats, and it's just increasing on an annual basis. And also, natural resource, I apologize, I skipped over that. Crab Island, Destin Harbor, each one of the bayous, all of the Choctawhatchee Bay shoreline covered in seagrass, covered in these very precious natural resources that we need to protect that are critical to our, the fishery species, to the environment, to the economic sustainability of the area. So we need to make sure we protect those and provide the proper protections. The Haas Center study that was done in 2014, we all know the value of the harbor, the businesses that are down there. That was formalized in an economic study that was done in 2014. It showed a lot of direct spending, a lot of indirect and induced benefits. The report we highlight in our report, it's available for your reading pleasure. One thing that it did fall short of was clearly specifying what the direct benefit of charter boats versus recreational boats versus the livery boats. And also it was done in 2014 so the research was done late 2013, early 2014. While the economy was turning around, it wasn't nearly what it was in 2005 and today. So just keep that in mind. I anticipate if that study was to be updated, we'd see even larger numbers. And it also didn't take into account the ancillary benefits such as the fishing rodeo, the seafood festival, some of these other activities that are directly tied to that industry, but yet not included. The limitations when we look at management considerations, while we do have that federal navigation channel, we are bounded geographically with the existing navigational depths. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into these, but it's pretty clear we have limited resources and limited available upland property in which to operate. There's also some pretty stiff state regulations. I had planned to read these, but they're quoted in the report. I believe Mr. Schmidt has informed you of a lot of these Section 327 Florida statutes. This primarily governs vessel safety and regulation in the state of Florida. And fortunately or unfortunately, whoever you are or how you're looking at this, the rules tend to be on the side of the navigating public. The state is wanting those public waters to remain public and to reduce the limitations on those open waters. So 32746, boating restricted areas. The city, the county, a local municipality, local government has very limited control of their open waterways. We can provide no-wake zones. We can provide boating restricted areas such as speed limitations, access limitations in the vicinity of marinas and boat ramps and mooring fields and other existing structures, areas where we have known congestion problems. It's very difficult to get those passed, and we've done a pretty good job, as I referenced County Ordinance 9611. Those no-wake zones in East Pass and Destin Harbor are actually governed by County Ordinance 9611. They were established a long time ago. Those no-wake signs are operated and maintained by the county. And from my review, I don't believe we have anything in our power at this moment to expand those areas. The county has already taken a pretty broad stroke and specified the restrictions within the areas that generally we can apply those. You have existing city regulations as well. I think the city's done a good job with their codes. Chapter 5 deals with boats, harbor, and waterways. Chapter 13 with license and permits. That's very familiar to the majority of you, I'm sure, with the recent passing of 1701, 1709, dealing with the licenses and registration for livery vessels. Chapter 11 of the Land Development Code deals with coastal management, coastal resource protection, but most importantly, marina siting. Whether it be residential or commercial, there are limitations on the books now as to the maximum extent of docks, the maximum number of slips you can put in. A lot of good criteria for how to develop not only a marina but also a recreational facility or a residential facility on the bay. One of the goals was to visit the Florida Ports Council. I don't know how familiar the majority of you are with the Florida Ports Council. Their goal and mission is to increase economic sustainability, increase commerce, and increase diversity of all of the regional commerce and infrastructure that, textiles that are coming into the state of Florida. They're really focused on that big, those big port facilities. When we went in and talked to the Florida Ports Council, the discussion primarily focused around Panamax ships and the recent opening of the Panama Canal and how these new ports or the existing ports are now becoming deeper and we're bringing in more cargo and more commerce. Destin doesn't really fit that mold. However, there are a number of designated port facilities on the books now that don't fit that traditional mold either. One of the first is the Port of Key West. They don't have commercial cargo, but they do have ferry terminals and cruise terminals. I don't see cruise terminals being a good fit for the city of Destin, but there are just the purpose is there are others that don't fit the mold. The other is the Port of St. Pete. Sounds big, sounds fancy, but really all that is just I think a 2,000 linear foot section of bulkhead to bring in large yachts, large vessels, research vessels. It's not a port by any other designation, really, aside from those two industries. So what we had proposed to the Florida Ports Council was something to focus on our existing resources. We have the Federal Navigation Channel. We have the Coast Guard Station. We have a mission-critical East Pass that must be maintained. And we have one of the world's largest charter boat fishing fleet. Not only that, we have the recreational components of Destin Harbor. So the pitch that was presented to the Florida Ports Council was, while we don't have your traditional port infrastructure, what we do have is this huge sport fishing community, this huge charter boat community, this huge tourism-based community that's likely just going to increase, especially with the amount of artificial reefs, snorkeling reefs, all the work that's being done with NERDA, the new Noriega Point project. It all aims in that direction, and we could even take it a step further by looking at other marine science, marine research, other industries that we aren't tapping. The Port Council was very receptive. They understood where we were going. We were looking for some funding. We were looking for some assistance with management. How can we better control our harbor? But they were also very, very straightforward in the fact that when we are competing, we're competing against the big boys. We're competing against, the Port of Miami, Jack's Port, all of the guys that receive basically 90 to 95% of all the funding that's out there. And it's going to be very difficult for us to justify whatever we may be looking for against those other industries that are bringing in, while we bring in a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, these guys are bringing in billions of dollars. It's just going to be very difficult to compete. And not only that, you can see by the list on the screen, port management and port designation is governed by Chapter 163 Florida statute. We have to have transportation plans. We have to have comp plan revisions. We have to have a master plan. We have to have a vision. The objectives of the master plan are listed there below. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into that port plan. So while I'm not recommending to take it off the books, it is something we want to take a longer, harder look at for a long-term vision, and perhaps there's some things we can do in the near term that would support that as a long-term goal. Following the port meeting, we also did some research on special districts. I'm sure you're all familiar with special districts. Those are governed by Section 189. It can be dependent, independent. It can be as simple as council designate a special district through an ordinance. There are a lot in the state of Florida that specifically focus on the issues that we're concerned with: harbor and waterway management, coastal resource protection, inlet management. There's quite a few Jupiter Inlet districts, St. Augustine Port and Waterway District, that have many of the same issues that Destin has. Unfortunately, those guys have been around for quite some time. They've worked the kinks out. It's not. I don't want to present this as it's just something we can pass an ordinance tomorrow and we've got a special district and our problems will be solved. It's a vehicle, an ends to a mean, but we need to be very careful in establishing the vision before we move forward with the special district. And then, obviously, as I mentioned, funding is a critical component here. Department of Economic Opportunity has a number of funding programs that we've identified. The first is the Waterfronts Florida Partnership Program. This is a really interesting program. There's not a lot of money. I think it's on the order of $40,000, but it's specifically targeting long-term historical working waterfronts and preserving that heritage and that culture that once existed, where perhaps it's becoming a little derelict or a little blighted in those community areas, but that is the specific focus of that particular grant. The other is there's a lot of community planning programs on how you can specifically target a region and an area and apply for a grant and have planning assistance for city staff, for consultants, whoever that may be, to come in and assist the local government.
Back up a little bit on the special districts. Doesn't the legislature have to approve these before they can be enacted? And I know I think the dependent actually went away. They're really, from my understanding, there is really no such thing as a dependent special district anymore.
You're correct on independent districts. And dependent districts, that's new to me, but I do believe...
I actually did that area law. You don't have dependent fire districts anymore, but you can have a dependent district for certain things.
Okay, my bad, sorry.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, dependent district is strictly under the control of the local governing body. Independent operates independently. And I'm an engineer. I'm not a planner by trade, but we do have some other expertise in the house. Mr. Jim Marino from Taylor Engineering and Francis Marino, a professional planner, is here as well. So what our recommended management options were, just resorting the recommendations you saw in the beginning of the report. We'll go through each one of these. And again, I know these are very difficult to read, and I hope you're referring to the report for these tables, but we tried to compile the information in a easily digestible format to where we presented our option, the objective, the planning areas, advantages, disadvantages, what may the regulatory process involve, the schedule as to how that could and should be implemented, and the costs associated with that. So the first item was a review of City of Destin codes and ordinances. City staff has done a great job. You're already taking this step. You've already passed some recent updates as far as the livery vessels that you're all familiar with, but perhaps there are some additional areas. If we could just find out what exactly that vision and goal is, perhaps there's other codes and ordinances that could be a little further refined. And I should note that we did not see any need for any reworking of the codes and ordinances. I think the codes that you have on the books are very good. It's just perhaps minor little tweaks here and there. Seeking grant funding for harbor and waterway planning. Pretty easy step there. There's no significant time or cost associated with that aside from some staff time. The third item, and perhaps the most important, is develop a vision and management or master plan for the harbor and the waterways of the City of Destin. We really need to focus in on what exactly the issues we're going to be addressing. As that second or third slide I popped up, there's a lot of concerns out there. We need to work with the citizens, we need to work with the local businesses, find out exactly what those issues are so we can best decide how to get those addressed. That's a little longer term, a little bit more costly there, but I think that is going to give you the vision on how you address each one of those and further support the follow-on recommendations. Number 4 was the Destin Harbor Channel realignment. There's been some confusion on this. I'm not proposing we come in and dredge the harbor to bring in some larger vessels. It's really making the harbor more user-friendly and safe. For those of you who are familiar with the harbor, you got a funky dog leg that comes in. We have a lot of livery vessels. We have a lot of pontoons. A general layman that doesn't have a lot of experience behind the wheel of a boat sees red, green channel markers all aligned and doesn't realize he's supposed to be zigzagging through those. He just kind of goes straight and says, well, maybe I'll just, downhill ski it. The 5th recommendation was a Destin Harbor mooring field. There's also, I think, a little confusion on this item as well. We're not proposing to turn Destin Harbor into a parking lot. You have a lot of flexibility as how that mooring field is designed, the size of boats, the spacing of the boats, the location of the mooring field. But the mooring field does give you some flexibility, meaning there are certain activities that are allowed and prohibited in the vicinity of those mooring fields. And just to give you an idea, just wanted to pop this up very quickly. This is where I'm referring to we would focus a proposed Destin Harbor Channel realignment. So this dog leg here, you have a relatively shallow sand shoal here. You've got a red and a green channel marker on either side of the channel here, here, and here, plus the shoal sign. It's very confusing and it's very distracting for a novice boater to come through there. So it would be relatively simple to come in and have that channel realigned and dredge it to where it was just a straight shot basically down the throat of the harbor.
I have a question.
Yes.
I admit I am not a skilled boating captain. The dog leg that you're discussing, why do we have to have that dog leg? Couldn't it be dug deeper, the trench deeper, to prevent that, or?
Yes. So the channel was defined and drawn by the Corps of Engineers decades ago. So this, again, it is the federally authorized channel. My belief is, and I don't, this is just my guess, my best guess, they were skirting along the landward side of Noriega Point because it was relatively deep water. It was protected by the sand spit. There was a shoal here, kind of offshore of Noriega Point and the Point 1 property. And being the federal government, they were looking for the path of least resistance and least cost alternative. So they just put this dog leg in the channel to move northeast and then run it along the marinas that are on the north side of the channel. So what we would propose is somewhere in this vicinity, midway along Noriega Point, deleting this existing channel and just having a straight line that comes right down the center of the harbor. That would give those boats on the northern side, it's very congested, a lot of marinas, that would give them a little bit more breathing room between the channel and the end of their marina. It would also give the navigating public a straight interstate, if you will, to traverse.
Thank you.
Sure. Option 6, create a Destin Harbor and Waterways Special District. Again, we've provided the advantages and disadvantages. I don't want to waste a lot of time reading each one of these. The schedule is, again, longer term. Again, we do need the vision and master plan and goals to best align that special district with the problems we're proposing to solve. And then
Matt, it would be drastically quicker if y'all did a dependent district, though, at the municipal level as opposed to the independent. The independent can do more items, but the timetable they gave, that's probably more in line with the independent special district, requiring an extra year for legislative stuff. You could cut that whole year out if y'all decide to do it dependent.
So a city can create a dependent special district. Okay, I thought it had to be the county.
It's also authorized that cities can do so.
Cool.
And then option 7 is seek and obtain possible port designation for Port Destin. Destin Harbor, again, a specialized port that focuses on sport fishing, recreational and commercial fishing, and the recreational industries that we have down on the harbor now. And just to summarize, I've kind of encapsulated these in some relatively short-term goals. Again, continue your work on the review of cities' code and ordinances. Explore those funding options. In the report, we did identify the funding sources. Some of those have a relatively short burn. I think they come out sometime in March, April, and then grant applications are due sometime early to mid-summer. We can certainly work with staff to make sure they're aware of those and support them in any grant writing they may need, and then work on a vision and master plan. This is for you as the policymakers. We did participate in the city's visioning session last May. There was some good discussion on the vision for Destin Harbor, the vision for the city's waterways, but I think that really could take a nice long look to help better gauge our long-term goals, which may include the channel realignment, possible mooring field, special district, or the port designation. So with that, I'll close, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And I did forget one item under Section 327 Florida statutes. We included this in the report, but the Fish and Wildlife Commission had established a pilot program to explore potential options for regulating anchoring or mooring of non-liveaboard vessels outside of marked boundaries of the public mooring fields. They were also tasked with looking at the issue involving derelict vessels, navigational safety, and unfortunately, while they did come up with some solid recommendations and some potential drafts for Florida statute revisions, unfortunately, the issues related to long-term storage of vessels at anchor, while unattended, can become safety hazards. Inoperable vessels being used as residences, marine sanitation, those remained unresolved. So this isn't just a Destin-centric issue. The state is looking at this. FWC is looking at this. We're working with them as close as we can, but that pilot program was not reinitiated and refunded this year, but I do believe it'll be coming back soon. So that's another thing we'll be tracking. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any further questions?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I mean, that was really illuminating. I know when Tuffy brought this up last year and we started looking at some different things, we weren't very sure what possibilities might even exist. So this really, really helps. I have a question. Isn't there already an existing mooring field around Crab Island, and that's why Some of that legislation was allowed to be passed, that the county instituted the safety corridor and some other things that I believe Representative Matt Gates at the time was looking at doing?
No, there is not a permitted and regulated mooring field on Crab Island. What you're seeing out there is a lot of just commercial activity that's, I was at a number of the Crab Island workshops, both at the city and well as the county level. There's a lot of regulatory umbrellas and realms that exist out there, and there is no framework or structure that I'm aware of that's regulating any of those at the moment, aside from business licenses and that sort of thing. But as far as regulating the mooring, what they were able to do with the safety corridor was that's not a restricted area. That is a, and the terminology escapes me. So there's a couple different variations. You can have an exclusion zone and a restricted zone and an informational purposes zone. Something we're working on with the county is possibly signing the northern end of Crab Island for educational purposes to say danger shallow shoal seagrass. We're not prohibiting the folks from going in there. We're not prohibiting them from anchoring or running their boats wild. We're just educating them to the fact that there are shallow seagrasses there. Perhaps they need to be aware. That was the same permitting vehicle that the county got the access corridor permit under. And to your point on Matt Gates's regulation, there was some proposed regulation that would have affected that, but I believe there was some concern with, whether or not boats could be anchored for a 24-hour period versus 48-hour versus 72. But I believe they're still looking into that, although I don't see it growing legs anytime soon.
Thanks.
Meeting we had on Crab Island, we learned, I think for the first time, that's all owned by the National Park Service.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that they have regulations with regard to what can go in there, and they don't permit mooring overnight, for example.
Right, and that was sort of my next question, was that, is that not part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and they have some jurisdiction? Would that interfere with anything you discussed this evening?
No, and because Crab Island was not directly within the city limits, we didn't focus our study too much on Crab Island. However, it was acknowledged that a lot of the boats that moor in Destin Harbor and utilize the Destin Waterways are also utilizing Crab Island as well. But that is under the regulatory umbrella of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. One of the outcomes at the Crab Island meeting was, I believe they were going to come up with a regulatory framework, a permitting mechanism to where the existing businesses out there must be permitted through the Gulf Islands National Seashore, but I see that taking some time. I don't see it as being a quick solution you're going to see anytime soon.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Dixon.
Yes, I am concerned that some of this, and I'll say it, junk, is going to end up because they're going to make regulations that basically saying that they cannot leave that stuff out overnight. And so what's going to happen, the closest place to bring that stuff is to the Destin Harbor. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that our regulations are enough that they can't just hang a outboard motor on the back of a 40-foot barge and call it a vessel. So, I'm hoping that we've got our regulations tight enough to deter that, although from what I've seen here tonight, we may not. And Ms. City Manager, do you know if we can stop that from happening?
No, sir, I do not know that.
We have stopped it from happening.
We have, yes, sir. We pushed them out.
Let's continue to do so.
We will keep doing what we're doing.
And if I may, that's one of our recommendations is when we do look at the management of the city's waterways, we need to do it on a comprehensive scale. Pushing it out of Destin Harbor may create that problem in Joe's Bayou. Creating one designation in Joe's Bayou may create that issue in Marlar Bayou or back to the harbor. We need to look comprehensively to make sure that all of the city's waterways are covered, because right now, from what I understand, they're heading over to Fort Walton and Shalimar. And
just know that they're not going to take those things all the way across the bay every night. So basically, I think we did create a ordinance, resolution, or whatever it may be, to not allow that stuff to be on a harbor unless it's at a dock or a commercial dock or something like that. So, we have adopted stuff that And I know the sheriff's office has been enforcing it. So I'm hoping that we continue to do that, because I got to tell you, this stuff will get away from us. In Destin, you can drive around and see they're building stuff right now to go out there. And so, you know, yeah, if we don't keep a handle on that, we will be overrun with that stuff. And it's going to look like a circus, a fairground.
Steve has done a great job with drafting that ordinance, but his hands are tied. It's for floating structures and non-navigating vessels. So just keep that in mind. The city has the strongest ordinance on the books that you can within state statute, but state statute is a bit on the side of the navigating boater. Just keep that in mind.
Navigating boaters, not barges with...
Correct.
Yes. Oh.
That's it.
Any further questions, discussion? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Ms. Lejeune, you have the floor again.
The next item, sir, is the quarterly financial and investment report. No, I'm sorry. Back up. Holiday Isle Emergency Dredge and Beach Restoration Update. I'd like to turn it over to our city attorney, Mr. Jeff Burns.
We're about 99% of the way to an interlocal agreement with the county. They considered a version today. They, I think, gave the thumbs up to Greg Stewart with some just slight modifications that he's going to make. We went back and forth a lot for a couple of weeks there, but Greg and I came to an agreement on what would be fair in terms of all the legal aspects of it late last week. And so he's going to present his version to me tomorrow morning of what he says is the county's basically firm offer to us. I know they a big issue on it was what was called the post monitoring costs, and that was about a $300,000 line item that we're going to cut out of this emergency project and deal with that at a later point in time, because there were just some issues on that, and so we should have that ready. I'm going to actually ask if y'all can go and set a special council meeting for next Monday just to deal with this issue if y'all are so inclined. I think we'll have the interlocal ready at that point in time. I think we have all the easements out there being executed. I've received about half of them, and I see Alex out there. She's been helping me with the owners associations out there, and I think we could probably have them all wrangled up by next Monday too. And Mr. Trammell has provided us with this contract. I think we'll have it ready to go next Monday too, and I think that would just leave the dredging company, and who we've actually had talks with already. I don't think we're that far off with them, but there's kind of an order that everything has to be done. We would have to approve on our end the interlocal and all the agreements, but then also the county, since they're funding it, they do want to have some say in the form of the contracts, and so we would have to approve of them and then send them over to the county, and so that would be at their first meeting in March. So to be able to get that done kind of in a timely fashion, I would stress maybe set a meeting for next Monday.
If there's no objection, I don't think we need to vote on that, just consensus.
Yes, that's fine.
Yes, no objections, we'll plan on the meeting. The first break we took was I took a break to talk to Commissioner Wines about this issue, and he feels the county is moving right along and everything is running very smooth, mostly to the credit of Mr. Burns. And the interlocal agreement has been the toughest thing to work out. So we will plan on a special meeting then. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. The quarterly and financial investment report, our finance director, Mr. Bragg Farmer, is going to present that for us.
This is just the first quarter's financial report through the end of December. As you know, most of our revenue sources don't start coming in, especially our ad valorem revenue doesn't start coming in until December and January. So from a standpoint of revenue, we really are kind of in line where we have been in past years as well. From an expenditure standpoint, we do hold off on most of our large expenditures until after we start receiving our ad valorem revenue, as well as having funds available from the state based on the revenue sharing that we get. Other than that, it's just, like I said, a first quarter report. If you have any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer them. now or after the meeting if you choose.
Comments, questions? Thank you. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. All I have left is one announcement, and I would like to invite everyone to join the City of Destin and the Trust for Public Land to the Captain Leonard Destin Park groundbreaking ceremony this Thursday, February 22nd at 1 o'clock p.m. It'll be at 101 Calhoun Avenue. Our partners with this project was the Trust for Public Lands and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Once the park is built, the Trust for Public Lands will be turning the park over to the city, and we will receive 10 years' worth of operations and maintenance for the park. So we invite everyone to come out for the groundbreaking on Thursday at 1. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Dixon.
Ms. Lejeune, is there a way that the trees that blew down on that property where the big logs are out there, is there a way that we can give that? I hate to see that wood just sit there and rot. Somebody could use it as firewood. I hate to see it just sit there like that. Is there a way that we can find a way to give that away to somebody?
Let me look into that, sir. I was thinking the same thing when they said they're getting ready to break ground. I was thinking of all of that nice fireplace wood sitting out there.
That or let's have a bonfire, one of the two.
I'll be happy to look into that, sir. We'll see that wood doesn't go to waste.
We've lost our city attorney for a few minutes, and we need him for the next two items. By the way, the next two items are public hearings. Any member of the public that wishes to speak can do
Ms.
so.
Kopp can do the public hearings.
Oh, okay. We have second reading of ordinance 18-03-CC, committee, boards, panels, and commissions. Ms. Kopp, would you read by title?
As soon as I get there. This is, yeah, I have it. It's ordinance 18-03-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, relating to committee, boards, panels, and commissions, providing for authority, amending the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Article 2, Committee, Boards, Panels, and Commissions, Section 2-33, Appointment of Members, providing for the repeal of any inconsistent ordinances, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Ms. Lejeune, further comment?
Yes, sir. This ordinance on second reading, it hasn't changed since first reading at the last meeting. What this does is that it effectively splits what we referred to as a super committee. It takes the Parks and Recreation Committee and the Tree Board and makes them into two separate entities. We'll have the Parks and Recreation Committee and then the Tree Commission. Even though the tree ordinance is temporarily abated and will be repealed, you still have the option of separating these two particular committees into a committee and a commission if you so desire.
Thank you. Does any member of the public wish to speak on this matter? Not seeing any. Members of council, Councilmember Dixon.
Yes, I'll make the recommended motion. I move to approve ordinance 18-03-CC on second reading.
Second. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? If not, I call the question. Unanimous, yes. Second reading of ordinance 1804CN. Ms. Kopp, would you read by title, please?
Ordinance 1804CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, relating to the purchase of certain real property for the Crosstown Connector, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for City Council approval of a contract for purchase of townhome unit located at 603 Sandalwood Drive, Destin, Florida, and providing for an effective date.
Ms. Lejeune, further explanation?
Yes, sir. This is the first of several acquisitions that we are making to be able to construct the Crosstown Connector, the Beach Drive to Benning Drive Road project. Nothing has changed since first reading. Council has any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Again, this is a public hearing. Does any member of the audience wish to speak on this matter? Not seeing any, we go to council.
Mayor,
Council members.
I move that City Council approve ordinance 18-04-CN on second reading and direct the mayor to execute the ordinance and purchase agreement.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? If not, I call the question. Mr. Foreman?
I'm trying. I don't get done.
There. Unanimous, yes. Motion passes. Consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? If not, I call the question. Mr. Destin? Unanimous, yes, it's approved.
Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, sir, I would like to just introduce Mr. Ronsale and his associate. They are one of the special magistrate firms that the council has just approved. Would you like to, either one of you, say a few words for the council?
Please.
Casey King with Hand Arundel Harrison Sale. I just want to say thank you. We look forward to working with you.
All I want to say is that I found out the difference between the little crescent on your phone and the airplane, and I didn't know there was a switch on the side, so I apologize. My daughter taught me the hard way by calling back again and again. Thank you for your confidence in Casey.
Oh, I didn't see him.
Would
you like to come up, sir, and introduce yourself?
In a while.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Steve Hall. My firm is Hall & Runnels. We've been here in Destin with our Destin location since 1993. And proud to be here. I've seen a lot of you over the years. Glad to work in this position. I do believe that I'm proud of what the city's doing in relation to the enforcement of the code. And I'm especially impressed that you've taken the step to bring special magistrates on board. In my mind, it makes a great difference in the process.
Thank you. And we welcome both firms to our We'll move to council. Councilmember Braden.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say I think it's pretty impressive that Peter Boss and McGuire's was willing to fund nearly $40,000 to fund a smear campaign to put out a bunch of lies and stuff about myself. Apparently, they're wanting to build, I don't know, 2 or 3 more Emerald Grands, and I'm sitting in their way. So I just thought it was pretty impressive that I've made Fox News. That's pretty good. I mean, you think I was given making $250,000 sitting in this seat. See, don't pay a dime, and they're willing to spend that kind of money to get me out of here. They got an agenda. So thought that was pretty impressive. That's all I got to say, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Preble. Excuse me, Councilmember Ramsell.
It's all good. We're informal. Well, obviously, I second what Mr. Braden said. But I did want to bring something up this evening. I had a few people reach out to me that are regular attendees of the dog park, and we love our dog park, obviously, but there are some issues that are emerging that have to do with different fights breaking out, dogs not being vaccinated, and there's a concern that dogs with a bad temperament, dogs that are carrying a disease that perhaps we've eradicated here in Florida are entering the park. What happens if they bite a child? Obviously, we've had some issues with some other dogs. The vets have reached out as well. Well, actually, I should say I reached out to the vets, and they have a certain level of concern as well. So I wanted to see if I could have the city manager bring this issue back in the future. One of the recommendations that someone made, and I thought we could discuss it as a council, was having some sort of, I don't know, a bandana, a colored leash, or something that could identify pets that are current on vaccines. I'm not sure of all the details. This is something I'd like the council and the public to kind of discuss together and work together through, because, you know, we certainly don't want anything to happen at our fantastic dog park that would cause any problems and people not want to come. So I'd like to kind of nip this in the bud before it becomes something that gets out of hand. And other than that, nothing else for tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Dixon.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Foreman.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Councilmember Marner.
Nothing myself.
Councilmember Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. So somehow, I think you met Dolores, didn't you, Tuffy? And somehow I'm appointing her, but I'm happy to do it. I have your vote of confidence in her, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to appoint Ms. Dolores Morell to the Town Center CRA Advisory Committee.
I'll second that, and with a comment that she approached me at one of the city functions and is from out of town and wants to volunteer here, and she seems like a very genuine person, and so I was glad to put her in touch with Ray, and Ray met with her and talked with her, and thank you for being willing to accept her and see what she can do.
Great.
I believe that was a motion and a second. Discussion? If not, call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a property owner reached out to me. He owns that abandoned bank building at the corner of 98. It's on the east side of Walmart. But I worked it out with the city manager, and hopefully they'll bring up an annexation agreement to bring back to us. So that's that, but I do need to direct staff to go ahead and notice the second reading of the comp plan for our March 5th meeting. Is it March 5th? Yeah. So do we need?
You don't have to have a vote.
Okay.
If you want to do a vote.
I mean, we'll be happy to notice it. If we don't have the comp plan back at that point in time, we can always just cancel that. If there are comments, we will need to address the comments before it comes before you, but there's no harm with noticing it, is it, Ray? So we can go ahead and notice that with the understanding that, you know, it hopefully it'll be here, but if not, or if there's comments that we have to address beforehand, it may get delayed.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I got, Mayor.
Thank you. To add on to what Mr. Councilmember Braden said earlier, just for clarification, several council members, including the mayor, have now become ultra-liberals. I don't know about them, but I always thought I was conservative.
Rodney, have you ever considered yourself a liberal? Just curious.
Absolutely not.
Okay, just checking.
But, and Mr. Farmer, please correct me or help me along. I'm just going to use some round numbers. Where all this comes from was the city of Destin applied for and accepted a $3.5 million grant, federal grant, that's what paid for the 5 stormwater projects that were completed over the last year and a half to improve not only the drainage system within the city, but also it contains units that help filter the water, so the water is much cleaner going into the bay. You don't get as much oil and runoff from vehicles and other sources. I think we also added a deputy to patrol the harbor and a couple of minor things, but I'm assuming what your opponents want is no more federal money in the city, or you're a liberal. But by the way, I was quite surprised. I noticed at a meeting in Tallahassee where they pointed out that 60% of the total revenues to the state of Florida is from the federal government. And it depends on the years. Sometimes the city of Destin's revenue from the state filtering down is half or more of our total expenditures. So it flows through our budget when these things happen, and we obviously spending changes a great deal. Taxation didn't change one. Well, we did raise the millage rate to 0.001, right? 0.01 for stormwater. I'm sure it cost each citizen in the city at least $3 a month to pay for those massive drainage projects. I think say maybe $1, but whatever it was, I just wanted to point out that I guess if we accept any further federal funds, you become a ultra liberal. Anyway, I've taken enough time on that. Ms. Kopp, land use?
I don't have anything tonight, thank you.
Mr. Burns?
And I just want to thank Ms. Kopp for covering for me about 10 minutes ago. I had to catch the Taylor Engineering folks since the principals and the engineer were there. I went ahead and hashed out some of the contract with them, so we'll have it ready by next Monday.
We managed to get along without you. It almost shut the city down for a few minutes. We're now down to the public discussion. Any member of the public would like to come forward and speak can do so at this time. Wave your hands or stand up so I see you. Otherwise, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.